Hello and welcome to a new video. This is not going to be part of the main series on C-star algebras from a novice perspective, but it's going to touch briefly on a topic that I discussed in the latest video on approximate units. So as a quick background, just to get everyone up to speed, in the previous video, nets were introduced as a generalized kind of sequence whose index set is a directed set. And these were introduced to define the notion of an approximate unit, which is an important concept for Banach algebras in general. So just to make this video self-contained, I want to give the definition of a directed set once again in this video. So a non-empty set, which we denote by lambda here, by lambda here, equipped with a preorder, which we denote by this symbol here, is said to be a directed set if for every pair lambda and lambda prime in the set, there is a common upper bound in the set. That is, there should be an element mu such that lambda is less than or equal to mu, and such that lambda prime is also less than or equal to mu. And today I'd quickly just like to discuss why this definition looks the way it is and what it has to do with the sense of direction. Just to make a few things clear, because this is something that bothered me a bit before when I first saw this definition. And why do we even need to have it defined in terms of every pair in the set and so on and so forth? And this is easiest done by actually looking at a very simple finite illustrative example. So we have our set lambda here with some preorder that we don't really have defined clearly yet, but we can talk about different scenarios for this apple and orange and blue dot set that we have here. Now, if we were to say that this is not a directed set, say that we instead had just that every element has an upper bound, then what are we really saying? Well, if every element has an upper bound, instead of just having that every pair of elements has a common upper bound, what we're really saying is just that if this apple, well, it's less than or equal to itself, so we're really not saying anything if we just demand that the set, every element in the set has an upper bound. And this in and of itself makes it so that, okay, the definition is actually saying something new about this kind of set lambda. But what does it actually mean? Well, let us now assume that we have a few interesting restrictions. We have that this element here is only less than or equal to apple, and in turn that apple is only less than or equal to itself. So we have this path here, and now I realized I did something dumb there. I should go like this. Yes, beautiful. So we have that this blue dot is less than or equal to apple, and then we have that this blue dot instead is less than or equal to orange, and only less than or equal to orange. And likewise, orange is only less than or equal to itself. So we have this image here. Then when we look in this image, we can see that two small hills here appear, where you have one peak of one hill over here, and then you have another peak over here. Now, which peak is higher up of these two? Well, it's important to tell, or it's impossible to say, because as we all know, you can't compare apples to oranges. So even if we have these peaks and we can find them, we can't really say which peak is the biggest peak or the highest peak in this set lambda. So what happens then when we try to take the limit as the elements of lambda go higher and higher? Well, we can't really say what happens at the peak of the set lambda. But let's now instead assume that lambda is a directed set. What happens then? Well, let's still assume that apple and orange are not related to one another. We don't know which of these is bigger using this relation up here. But now we instead have a directed set. So then we know that these two must have a common upper bound, say this point over here, which obviously looks like it's higher up. Now, even if we have all of the other preconditions, that this point is only less than or equal to this apple, and this point over here is only less than or equal to the orange, we still have that the apple is less than or equal to this point high up here, which the orange is of course also less than or equal to. So now when we try to walk upwards in the set, it doesn't matter if we start at this base point, which goes to the apple, or this point, which goes to the orange. If we try to walk upwards in this set lambda to get to the peak of this mountain, or this set of mountains, or whatever we can call it, then we will see that we reach a common peak. And this is actually what happens, that when you have a directed set, instead of looking at the set lambda as a bunch of hills, which you can't really compare to one another and see which hill is higher, has a higher peak, when you have a directed set, you can think of the set as more of a mountain, where even if you can't compare two elements directly to one another, you can still see that when you try to move upwards from either of them, you will always go higher and higher in the set lambda, and you will always reach a common peak. You will always go towards some unique peak of the set. There cannot be two different peaks like so, because then these two peaks would of course be related to some other point up here, because they would have a common upper bound. So this is the beauty of having a directed set, that then you can't have this scenario where you have two different peaks and you don't know which peak is higher up. But instead, now that you know that there is one unique peak, and when you have a unique peak of a lambda in terms of this partial order, so you know that there is one unique way of getting to a highest point, or a closer and closer to the peak. And no matter which way you go, if you always try to move upwards, you will reach the peak. Then you can talk about limits in this set lambda. So then you can talk about the limit for elements in lambda. Okay, that was an ugly symbol here. But then you can talk about this expression by just taking lambda to be bigger and bigger in this set lambda. It will get closer and closer to the peak wherever you begin. And I think I will stop there. This is of course not a perfect picture. It will not give you everything there is to know about directed sets, but it's a nice intuitive way of viewing these structures that can be a bit hidden behind the definition if you look at this kind of definition for the first time. And who knows, I'll soon get back to the C-star algebra video series, but for now I just wanted to post this video as a quick standalone addendum to the last video. And I hope that it helps in understanding what directed sets really are about. Thanks for your attention, and goodbye.